Reddit, what were you fired for? I had finally averaged enough hours to force the company to make me full-time. Next day, pink slip. I used to work at a place where there was a 6-month probation period where they didn't have to pay you benefits. They would fire you after 5 months, 3 weeks and 4 days, then hire you again the next day just to avoid paying you benefits. Freaking criminals. I worked for a collection agency years ago for 7 days. I had been misled and did not know I was going to be working collections, but the money was good and I went through the week of training. The second week I'm on my own and this guy calls in and he is confused why he is in collections. He was a priest and his wife had a brain tumor and he ended up being exempt from the bills. I told him just to fax us over a copy of the paperwork and we would look at it. My manager called me over a little while later and explained that the paperwork was for another hospital. So I was like, okay, I should just tell him to fill out the same forms for the other hospital. He responded with, you could do that, or you can do your job and get me his money. I called him back and told him what to do and was fired a few minutes later. I was a bank teller and I didn't want to push credit products on poor people. Boss said he thought I'd be happier somewhere else. He was right. Attending my cousin's funeral. Management said immediate family only were considered. Child, grandparent and siblings. We were as close as brothers. Closer than my actual brothers. They said I would be fired if I didn't skip his funeral to stock their hungry man dinners and frozen juice. I told them they had better put the help wanted sign in the window. I was fired from a bank for spending all of my time trying to bypass the internet filter. In college, I was working at an Applebee's. I had put in my 2-week notice and this happened on day 12. A woman was complaining about how her iced tea was cloudy. I made a joke about our municipal water supply. Turns out, she was on the board of the municipal water company. She later called my manager and threatened to call corporate if he didn't do something about me. Well, I was fired. Frick that lady. Can you imagine getting someone fired for something so stupid? That said, it was a really bad waiter. I was working as the customer service team lead at a company that owned operated about a dozen online hookup sites. Basically my job entailed sifting through pictures of strangers' dongs, talking to strangers about why their dongs were so inexplicably dry despite paying exorbitant monthly fees to make them otherwise, troubleshooting site issues, and making dong jokes. I was fired for making a joke about blowing carnies for free rides on the Ferris wheel. That Bikini Kill song. There was context. The official documents say sexual harassment, and that I was sharing inappropriate details about my private life. These documents, with the innocuous company name headers, without even specifying that my job literally entailed staring at dongs, basically state that I personally sucked the dongs of transient carnival workers, and then bragged about it at work. Quitting. I was fired for quitting my very first job. I was 18 and was working at a gas station just down the street from my house. Shortly after I got my job there I found a better paying job doing tech support in a call center for HP. I know, right? I have my boss at the gas station 3 weeks notice that I would be leaving for a different job. He was the nicest guy I'd met but he lost his mind when I said I was leaving. He accused me of just wanting to work there for a paycheck and didn't care about his gas station and I just wanted free cash register training. WTF, who needs that, but whatever. He tells me I can't quit because he's firing me. Straight out of a bad movie. I say whatever and left and caught the bus home. A couple weeks goes by and I haven't got my final paycheck yet, which wasn't much, maybe about $125. I called the gas station and he said he wasn't going to mail it to me and that I had to come in and pick it up myself. So I got a friend to pick me up and drive me down to the station and my old boss is sitting behind the glass with some smug look on his face when I see it. It's a big bag of change that we use to do money drops at the bank in. He says thanks for freaking up his gas station and accused me of stealing a vanilla Pepsi, if anybody remembers those. My friend and I drive around the corner to count the money to make sure it was all there and when I open the bag I finally see what's in it. Pennies. Only pennies. There isn't a single nickel, dime, quarter or loony. Frick. I had to laugh because at the same time that I was pissed off I still thought it was a pretty funny thing to do someone, even if that someone was me. It took about 10 minutes to count out $20 in pennies with my buddy and we drove back around to get some gas. Because the boss never worked until he didn't know we had come back until I went inside with my shirt rolled up full of pennies, which I proceeded to unload onto the counter, with the majority of them spilling over the edge onto the floor. Boss came running out from the back freaking out and telling me to get out, and I was never allowed back in there. Worth it. I worked in a bakery from when I was 16 to just before my 18th birthday. The boss didn't want to pay me higher wages for being over 18. The stupid thing was it was cash and handwork. He could have just continued paying whatever he wanted. Years ago, I was a waiter in a nice restaurant at a popular ski resort in Vermont. The general manager fired me because of my attitude. Apparently he didn't like me spell checking and grammar checking the menus and wine lists for him. The owner asked me back the next day. I declined, but the general manager that fired me was eventually let go. I used to work for FedEx Express in the Memphis hub loading aircraft. One day, I hit the engine of an Airbus A310, we called them the baby bus, with the loader while backing it away from the airplane after it was fully loaded. I took a chunk out of the metal cowling on the front of the engine. I was subsequently fired, after a brief investigation, and probably cost the company upwards of $1 million. As someone who works for a shipping company and specifically the air side of it, I'm surprised they didn't walk you out on the spot. I've seen them walk people out for that. When I was a teenage telemarketer, I told a customer to suck on my balls. Present them. Having a temporary summer job during college and being 2 days away from becoming a member of the union, you're automatically in after 90 days. Union employees receive $3 more an hour. A lot of companies do that for their lower level positions. They keep you until the end of your probationary period, and then fire you 2 days before it ends so they do not have to give you benefits or a pay raise. I was a server at a family-owned restaurant. I had already been working there for a year and a half when the owner's daughter decided she wanted to get involved in the business and she started serving also. A couple weeks later, one of the daughter's friends started working there too. It sucked because bringing them on was cutting into my tips and the friend was just an overall awful person. About a month into this whole situation, the friend said that she wasn't feeling well and asked if I could cover the rest of her closing shift for her. I was scheduled to go home early that night. I agreed because that meant more money for me. After I finish closing, I get pulled aside by the owner and he basically says, "I really appreciate you stepping up like that, but we're terminating you." When I asked why, he just said a bunch of little things in a way that I could tell he was talking out of his butt. A couple weeks later, I ran into one of the servers that had been working there for 15 years and asked if she knew anything about it. She said that, from what she could tell, they couldn't afford to keep on all of us, and I got the axe because I wasn't related to the family personally. TLDR, nepotism. I gave my friends free ice cream. Edit. Seriously though, stealing hurts everyone because it makes prices go up and that isn't cool, no matter how cool ice cream is. Getting hit by a car. Guy slid on the ice, up onto the sidewalk and knocked me out into the middle of a 4-lane street. Was asked by management if I really got hit, because she heard I just got bumped. Took 3 years of therapy and surgery to get my knee back to semi-normal. I got fired from Borders because the person that was covering for me while I was on vacation got fired. That's horse crap. While working overnight security at a call center, I got a phone call at around 3 AM from my youngest brother saying he was in the hospital. He said he tried to kill himself. So I called my boss to see if anyone can come in to cover the rest of my shift. 3 more hours, so I can go see him because my parents were out of town at the time and both of my other brothers live out of province. He be about having a meeting the next day but tells me to sign off the computer and to go ahead and leave and that he'll be there in 10 minutes. Cool. I get a phone call not 5 minutes after seeing my brother. I'm still with him, and it's my boss. He starts raging at me and asking where the heck I am. I tell him I'm with my brother at the hospital where he literally just told me I could go. He launches into a loud, angry speech about how irresponsible I am for leaving before he got there. Yada yada yada. Now I am in no mood to be hearing this from by far the most incompetent person I've ever had to work under. So I tell him that it's a friggin' call center and that 10 minutes without me there isn't the end of the world. He goes, "It's not like your brother is dead. You should have waited." Well, if it's not that big of a deal to you, then maybe you won't have to worry about working here anymore. I saw red. I ripped into him for a solid minute about his incompetence and how unbelievable it is to fire someone for something you told them they could do, especially in a family emergency. He calls me a piece of crap. I tell him he's the worst person I know and that I wish his recent heart attack would have put him in the hospital too so no one would visit him. Harsh, but with how much crap I dealt with from this guy and what kind of person he is, it was warranted. I hang up the phone and the nurses come over to see what's going on because I raised my voice and my brother is now crying because he thinks he got me fired. I explained the situation and consoled my brother, told him it wasn't his fault, etc. My brother has recovered fully physically and emotionally since then and even got a scholarship to play university football. Unfortunately, my old boss still has his job, but I found a much better one afterwards and am now in a managerial position. TLDR. Brother calls me at work from hospital after attempted suicide. Boss gives the go ahead to go be with him. Calls me at hospital and fires me for leaving. I was a supervisor at a large national grocery chain and was dating one of the cashiers. One night while she's working the overnight shift, she calls me, crying, and says that she has a huge line and that her overnight support is hanging out in the parking lot with friends instead of helping her. I drove up to the store, and the guy was, in fact, hanging out in the parking lot with some friends. I approached him and said, "I need you to get inside and help with the customers," and trying to show off for his friends. He responds with, "Frick you, you're not even on the clock. You can't make me do crap," which wasn't technically wrong. I asked again, "Could you go inside and help?" and he stepped up, stood about an inch or two from my face, and said, "Just what the frick are you?" and before he could finish the sentence I dropped him with a hook to the jaw. I didn't even think about it, I just did it. He crumpled to the ground and lied there for a moment, then got up with tears in his eyes and screamed, "I can't believe you fricking hit me," and ran inside the store. He called his mom. We were both around 17 at the time. His mom called the cops, and I ended up losing my job and getting a ticket for misdemeanor assault. Dated the cashier for 8 more years after that. Been married now for 5, and we just had our first child late last year. Worth it. TLDR. Worked as a manager, was accused of stealing, arrested, lost house, girlfriend, charged and turned out to be a clerical error, all after years of getting myself straight and living in squats. I was back to square one. I once worked as a manager for a well-known but smaller retail company. In the UK they pay you in a management role a month up front. In my experience, so on my first day I got my wage. I spent it on bills and the like and food and celebrating getting my life on track after years of being no fixed abode. Exactly 1 month to the day I started, I wander into work quite happily and my area manager is in with this other manager, and apparently the safe was missing £1,000 exactly, and also, I had took it and they wanted it back. Basically, me gobsmacked and not wanting to say anything that gets me further into trouble. My life hangs in the balance here. Handed over my keys and left without signing a thing. So I tell my girlfriend when I get home. She does not believe me. Why would there be exactly that missing? Admittedly, I had a past of drugs, which is what screwed me in the first place. And why would they sack me on the spot with no proof? She leaves me. No wage coming in, so default on all bills. Lose my house. The cherry on top, I get arrested and carted to the local police station where I am held in a cell next to a screaming drunk for 8 hours. The copper, given my past with drugs, had me condemned. My life was in tatters. I was charged with no evidence for theft by employer and let out. 3 days before my bail hearing, I get a phone call from area manager lady asking me to come in, so recording devices on. I walked in and she told me we, as in she, had counted the money I had counted wrong and sent the bundles back in £3,000 bundles. One of the bundles had £4,000 and the bank had neglected to tell us, so the figures were right. My safe was not. The bank had adjusted the paying in slip. Basically, I bundled it and she just sent it out. So kids, don't do drugs, because even if you sort yourself out, crap sticks. Was accused of stealing, arrested, lost house, girlfriend, charged and turned out to be a clerical error, all after years of getting myself straight and living in squats. I was back to square one. This is what lawsuits are for. When someone ruins your life over their own mistake, You lawyer up and get your life back. I got fired from my cake decorating job at Baskin Robbins for making a cake that said Happy Yak Shaving Day and placing said yak cake in display case. That's a dumb reason to get fired. I got caught making love to a waitress in the walk-in cooler of the bar I worked at. Pants around my ankles, hiked up her skirt, bent her over a keg. General manager walked in. Apparently we were not allowed to do that. Show me in the employee manual where this is specifically forbidden. The last time I got fired was for not doing enough work. I deserved it. This was 9 years ago. But the boss was a dong about it, and I vowed revenge. I was forced to take whatever job in my field I could find, which landed me in another state. I was lucky to go to a firm that was great about teaching anyone who worked there all the skills they cared to learn. I learned a ton about my business. Then I moved to another job in another state, where I learned even more about the business and got better at being a good worker. Then I found a job in my home state. Within the first few months we went up against the firm who fired me for a contract with a local city. My new boss said go get them and I did. We won the contract. This was a big deal because the firm that fired me works almost exclusively in the specific field the contract was for, while it's only a passing interest for the firm I'm at now. But, due to my presence, we're picking up more and more business, creeping further into the territory of the firm who fired me, and now my current, benevolent boss, wants to sell me the business, which will make me free to compete with the firm who fired me as often as possible. The firm I will be taking over has a better staff, better resources, and a better reputation. This is a fight I can win. I've probably got another 20 years of career left. I'm coming for you, Mike. Dang, this one is definitely my favorite. Mike, you'd better check yourself. I was working at a grocery store in the bakery. I dropped a muffin on the ground and ate some of it instead of throwing it out. I got fired for stealing. It probably didn't help that I was working full-time hours as a part-timer, but that's their fault for making me a lead. I did animal husbandry for a research facility, cleaning, feeding, playing with the animals, etc. Really fun but really lonely. I could go an 8-hour shift without seeing another person. I also wore earplugs. The animals could get exceptionally loud around feeding time, but this added to my feelings of isolation. So I started singing to my animals while I cleaned my rooms. They seemed to enjoy it. One day I'm singing Crazy Rap, Colt 45, by Afroman. I was really getting into it, hosing down urine pans practically screaming. I ate that pea like shrimp fried rice when I heard someone yell my name. Apparently I'd forgotten to check my email that day as a representative for a pharmaceutical company was doing a facility tour. I turned around to see my manager standing there with the most severe mom glare I've ever seen, and a businessman trying really hard to keep a straight face. There was no talking my way out of that one. I worked in a call center for 6 whole days. It was for a catalog clothing company. I was trained on the job. On my first day unsupervised, a guy called in and yelled at me for his parcels being left in the rain. I explained that was nothing to do with us and he got more angry and said I kept messing up his order and had sent him the wrong size and the wrong thing before and he wants this put right. He called me a bunch of names and said I was really stupid and clearly can't do my job. I explained I was new, I couldn't control what is sent or how it is posted, but I would go get my manager as he needs to speak to someone more senior than myself. I transferred him over, and the person next to me asked if I was okay. I said no. The guy was really mean to me. How did he think it was me, a phone monkey, who controlled his mail? Turns out, I never transferred him over properly. He heard me, and complained to the manager. You have been visited by the IT lizard. Upvote or experience bad internet for a month. Thanks for watching. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.